Hello again. I'm Mike, and this is Keepers of the Word. Today's topic is the Fraternal Review magazine, Subculture, with our special guest, Johnny Arias, guest editor and writer of this issue, and also professional tattoo artist and owner of Rite of Passage Tattoo. We also have with us Angel Millar, editor-in-chief and writer of the Fraternal Review magazine, and is also an author of several books, which I'm currently reading one of them. And I highly recommend it. Check them out on Amazon. So let's get this started. Johnny and Angel, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it with such short notice.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. What is the Fraternal Review magazine?
Well, the Fraternal Review is published by the Southern California Research Lodge, and it is a monthly full-color Masonic magazine, which is in both print formats and PDF. It's been going for several years, but it's been sort of getting glossier and cooler over the last few.
How would you define subculture in your own words, Johnny?
Well, it's the ideas of music, art, a way of life from which a group of people within a society or culture, which are different from the way the rest of society lives, right? So the punk subculture specifically, that would include a diverse and widely known array of ideologies, fashion, different forms of art and expression, dance, literature, film, and it's largely characterized by the anti-establishment views and the promotion of individual freedom, really, from which the culture originated from.
What got you involved in the scene?
Well, growing up in Hollywood, that's where I was born and raised, and I've been into punk, gothic, dark wave, new wave, all that my whole life. To this day, I've never waned away from it. So, at an early age, what actually got me into the scene would be, skateboarding in Hollywood, and skateboarding back then, especially during the 80s, skateboarding and punk rock just went hand in hand, and it was our basic mode of transportation through the city. So it was very common for punks to skate. I mean, and all through Hollywood, it was also very common for us to be hitting Hollywood Boulevard with maybe 20 plus skaters, all of us punks just, terrorizing the streets.
What about you, Angel? How'd you get involved?
Yes, I was really into punk and goth when I was growing up. When I was a teenager, I was later on I was into Led Zeppelin and Motorhead and an array of different subcultures. But I think really it was just the music that appealed to me and the sort of outrageousness. And, I think later on, some of those influences also connected to neo-paganism and curious forms of spirituality as well. So that probably kept my interest.
What positive experiences did you have growing up in subculture, in your culture? And that could go to either one of you.
So maybe, Johnny, you should take that.
Yeah, I think punk offered a way, a brotherhood, really, it provided a way for us to band together, because there wasn't a lot of people that we can gather with that were into similar practices, and the punk scene was just a very tight-knit community. And in his book Subculture, The Meaning of Style, Dick Hedbidge, he explains that subculture brings together like-minded individuals who feel neglected by societal standards and allow them to develop a sense of identity. And that's really what banded us together, that sense of identity.
What I took from you, Angel, is resist the chaos, right? But when you're in your younger years, you kind of go
Yeah, for
running
sure.
into the chaos. I feel that you need to do that to find out these boundaries,
Yeah.
to explore. Do you agree?
Well, certainly that was what happened to me. Yeah, I mean, I was kind of a little bit out of control in my teenage years, to be quite honest, and experiencing life much more than I probably should have been at a young age, going to nightclubs, alcohol, etc. And you know, and it was pretty outrageous, and you know, to be quite honest, probably quite dangerous to be a teenager coming home in the middle of the night by yourself. But
Yeah.
you know, at the same time, it also, I think, got me over that pretty young. I mean, certainly by the time I was 18, I was pretty sick of going to nightclubs, whereas most people hadn't even started. So I'd already moved on to spirituality by that point. So
Wow, you
fast
grew
and
up
loose,
fast.
to quote Modad.
It's not a bad thing, though. The
Yeah.
younger you learn, the better, I feel, you know. How did that transition into your adult life?
What's that, punk?
Well, just subculture in general. How did that transition from you being a kid, going out and partying, to getting a 9 to 5? Because I know you were in tech at
Yeah,
some point, and doing
it's
that.
very similar to Angel. I got a fake ID at a young age. I mean, I think I got my fake ID when I was 14, or 15, and luckily there was a lot of shows that were all ages, because that's another thing within the punk culture. Like a lot of punks. I mean, I remember bands like, Ian McKay of Fugazi, like shows that he would play often, he would refuse to play if it wasn't all ages, um, because he felt like, where do these younger kids have to go? If everything's 18 and over, 21 and over, then, what about the youth? What about the youth of today? So I got to experience a lot of that. So by the time I was 18, 19, I had been pretty clubbed out myself, much like Angel. And um, that was during a time too, like during that time, there was the beginning, the inception of underground clubs. Today we may know them as raves, but back in the day, like in LA, during that scene, it was uh, death rock undergrounds, and then I transitioned to IT. I got a job as a network engineer right out of school. My mom got me a job at her company, and so that was interesting, because here I am, like full blown punk rock, and then I'm working 9 to 5 as a network engineer.
The khakis
Yeah.
and the polo
Well,
shirts.
not that bad, but like they didn't,
Yeah.
because I was in IT and I didn't have to face customers. They really didn't care what we wore for the most part. So
That's pretty cool, because in most IT jobs, they're not very that lax unless you're on the creative side, and it's okay. But I get the gist. So how did you guys make the connections between Freemasonry, punk, metal, tattoos, and how did that come
Yeah. So
together
Johnny,
in this
maybe you
issue?
want to talk about the development from it being originally a tattoo issue to an issue on subculture in general.
yeah, that's where we started. We started doing some digging, and what we found was there's just wasn't a whole lot on the topic of tattooing. There's not much on tattooing in general, unless you get into really where you find the bulk of it is when you get in anthropology, which is fantastic. I mean, I love that stuff. But um, so because we couldn't find many connections with the fraternity and tattoos, and to be specific, then we kind of ventured off into folk art. So we entertained that idea as well. And then given our background, Angel and I have a very similar background. So given that, we said, well, what about subculture? Let's just go with blanket subculture, and that can that can fulfill a lot of different avenues with regard to the issue. So,
what did you find? And if you don't mind sharing that, because I don't want to give too much away of
Sure.
too much of the issue away, but what did you find that gave you these aha moments? Oh, hey, I
Yeah.
didn't know that existed, or I didn't know this
Right.
guy
So
was
Johnny and
involved
I
in this.
really we communicated a lot. We were speaking every week and doing research into the subject, and we really just found more and more connections. And so, when you read through the issue on subculture and Freemasonry, you'll find we have articles on punk, heavy metal, beatniks, tattoos, record art as well. So it really covers a range, a little bit of esoteric thrown in as well, and post-punk as well. But and it probably seems, if you don't know anything about these subjects, to be a kind of stretch to Freemasonry. But actually, we find that a lot of punk bands, a lot of heavy metal bands, are influenced by Freemasonry and/or esotericism. We focused on Freemasonry specifically. And you find a lot of album art as Masonic symbolism, such as Killing Joke's Pylon, for example. And it really shows up in a lot of places that you wouldn't expect. And you find this sort of influence of Freemasonry. It's not always obvious, but when you start looking, you find a lot of it. And, we look at the philosophical connections between punk and Freemasonry, and we look at historical connections between punk, heavy metal, beatniks, records, tattoos. And Johnny wrote an article on tattooing and Freemasonry, which cites examples from going back all the way to the 18th century. So really, we cover a lot of the history, the philosophy.
So to a new reader, they're going to learn a lot about actual Masons, bands,
yeah,
artists.
That's right. And if you look at the article on heavy metal, for example, the writer Frada, he really looks at the philosophy of heavy metal, symbolism of heavy metal, and how it connects to initiation and Freemasonry. So, you get not just, I would say, not just an article on heavy metal and Freemasonry, but you really get a real in-depth understanding of the philosophy, the symbolism, the esotericism behind it. Again, in one of my articles, I talk about the Swedenborgian rite of Freemasonry, which most brothers have probably never heard of. Aleister Crowley and other forms of esotericism related to Freemasonry. So.
Next question, and that is, do you feel there's a stigma amongst Masons regarding subculture?
Do you want to take that, Johnny?
Sure. I think it depends on the brother, particularly older brothers that may not understand or may not care to understand. But I think for the most part, I've never encountered a brother that wasn't willing to at least entertain the idea of getting to know us. As wild as some of us may look with tattoos and our way of life, right? Because that is what Masonry teaches, right? To meet on the level, whether you're a CEO executive or a tattooer. It really doesn't matter. So if we're not practicing those things within the fraternity and amongst ourselves in lodge with brothers, then what of the teachings? Then, one can say that perhaps that particular brother that may be in opposition with our views has some smoothing to do on his ashlar, right?
I agree. And this weekend was a perfect example of that. I felt that everybody was engaging with both of you fairly well, and it was a fun time. And you had people from all walks of life there, all cultures, right? So I believe wholeheartedly in what you just said right now. It's very, very true. Where do you feel subculture adds value to the craft? Where a Mason comes in, like for instance, when Mitch Horowitz said, "Hey man, I'm thinking about joining," I almost blew up in my head. But how do you feel? How do you feel how subculture adds to
subculture in the sense of punk and heavy metal, or
I think the way people are, For instance, if somebody
Right.
like Mitch, he shows up in his jacket,
Yeah,
jeans
yeah.
all the time.
Well,
That's
one
him.
of the points that we make in the issue, Michael Jarzabek wrote a really great article on punk, comparing it to Freemasonry. And we today we may think of Freemasonry as suits and ties and tuxedos, and that's certainly part of it. And we're not trying to take away from that. But if you go back to the 18th century, certainly you find that brothers are painting their own aprons, they're painting their own floor cloths, they're embroidering their own aprons, they're writing their own Masonic songs. And, it's a whole culture of creativeness, really, of creativity. And that's most certainly got lost. No one paints their own aprons anymore. And if you look at examples, for example, of 18th, 19th century aprons that have been painted by brothers or maybe by their wives or daughters in some cases, you find that they're not technically brilliant. They're quite amateurish. They're very naive. That in itself seems to me to link to punk, where you would paint not your leather apron, but you would paint your leather jacket with band images or images of death and so on. And when you think about it, for example, the Masonic apron with the skull and crossbones or memento mori, you find this exactly turning up on the black leather jacket during the 20th century in subculture. And one thing that punk, heavy metal, or subcultures in general remind us is that vibrant cultures are creative. They're not just endlessly rewriting their history. And when Freemasonry was at its most vibrant, it was a creative culture. Brothers were painting their own aprons, their own floor cloths. They were involved in creativity. And I think, with the Fraternal Review, what we really want to get back to is creativity, thinking outside the box. And I think this is very much what this issue is about, really, the subtext.
Great answer. How do you feel you represent
Okay.
I'm asking you, Angel, because I want to know, how do you feel you represent subculture in the craft?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you're known as this author, and you're
Right.
a pretty stoic dude, and nothing
Right.
about you screams punk rock, but
yeah,
it's still within you.
So I think,
know what I mean?
as with authors that might inspire you, or music that might inspire you, really what you want to extract from that is not a style per se, it's an attitude. Mozart wasn't a classical musician. He was the punk rocker of his day. He had that attitude to defy tradition and create something out of tradition that was more revolutionary, more beautiful, more emotional, whatever it may be. And so I'm not here saying let's all wear leather jackets. Far from it. Although if you want to do that, that's fine. But what I am saying is, let's have that attitude. Let's get that attitude back of we're not a society for amateur historians. You take the third degree and then you start endlessly writing histories of Freemasonry. I've written histories of Freemasonry, but what we should be about is that punk rock attitude, or that 18th century Masonic attitude of we're going to paint our own floor cloths. We're going to create our own material culture. Why don't we write some Masonic songs today on an electric guitar or whatever it may be? I might not like all of it, but that's not the point. The point is you apply your own creativity to create an experience for you and your brothers to represent the fraternity in this 21st century. We cannot live in the past as we have tried to do in the past sometimes.
I agree.
I was just going to add,
ahead.
Punk is an ideology, not just a sound. So it's deeper than meets the eye.
Agreed. I think we should go back to our individuality, and I think that's what the brothers back in the day were trying to do. Is this is me. This is who I am. It may not be pretty, but it speaks of who I am on the inside. And I feel we've lost a lot of that in Masonry, and it's not that you have to wear,
Hmm.
your emotions on your sleeves, but I feel,
Hmm.
individuality with your aprons can
Yeah,
look
and
pretty
let
damn
me just
cool.
say, my favorite aprons are the sort of 19th century hand painted aprons that are very, very naive. And when I look at them, I don't think, oh, these are well painted, because they're not. But what I think is there's a lot of love that went into that, a lot of time and a lot of hard work and care and attention. And, that really speaks volumes, I think, about what members of our society felt for it, really.
Angel, in your book, Path of the Warrior Mystic, the chapter Developing a Powerful Self Image, do you feel growing up,
Hmm.
um, when you're a child, when you're
Yeah.
a kid in subculture, how did that help write that
Well,
chapter?
like most things, it's a double-edged sword, right? So, yeah, sure, it definitely helped me to break away from the majority of people I knew and to come into conflict with people to sort of forge a self-identity. But of course, you can end up, your real identity can be submerged in this other culture. So you go from one to the other. But, I think these experiences, often difficult as they are, help you in the long run to maybe not discover who you are so much, but to have the guts to try new things and to ask questions of yourself. And I think that's important, certainly in forging a self identity for sure.
Johnny, how do you feel you represent subculture in Freemasonry?
I'm involved in a lot of education within the craft, both with the Illumination lecture series in South Pasadena and then some study groups and whatnot. And the one thing that I've noticed is that candidates that are interested in joining the fraternity, when they first come to lodge and they're greeted by someone like me, if they are themselves into some sort of subculture, even if they're not, I think they feel a sense of relief that they're not being greeted by someone who's older, perhaps. Who knows who knows what picture they paint in their head before stepping into the lodge? One can only imagine. I'm parking my car. I'm about to enter this lodge. I'm going to meet these guys for the first time. What can I expect? Are they expecting guys in their 70s in suits, very conservative, judgmental? Who knows? Who knows? However, I do see a sense of relief on the faces of these candidates when they enter the lodge, for instance, for the study group. When they see someone like me, the likes of me, like greeting them at the door. I'm tattooed, down to earth. Uh, Nothing is weird, in the sense of being stuffy. And you can almost see a relief both on their face and body. Their expression is of relief. And so, representing subculture in the craft, I think it's an attribute for sure. Because, in terms of me guarding the West Gate, there's that job, but then there's also, you know, letting these candidates feel at ease in our company and letting them know that, hey, you're you're in good company. You know,
You're
you're
on the
on the
level.
level. Yeah.
And I had that I had that experience with Ron actually. My first time going to lodge, I put on a suit because I thought
See what I
exactly
mean?
what you were
Yeah.
saying. And I get there and I see Ron behind a bar with a biker cut, tattoos. And at first I didn't think he was, I thought he was just a bartender, but then I find out he's a past master. Then I'm like, oh, okay. I feel
Right.
comfortable. So that worked, that worked out well. What would you say Masons and non-Masons would find interesting in this issue?
Do you want to take that, Johnny? Or
Sure. Yeah. It would depend on their own interests. If they're into subculture or at least have an awareness of subculture, then perhaps they'll find some gems in there. If not, then it'll open them to a world that they probably didn't know existed. Um, which is the same response I'd imagine we'll be getting from many of our brothers who are Masons and have been part of the craft for years, if not decades. Um, they will learn quite a bit about us. Because, when you take into consideration the issues that we normally publish at the Fraternal Review, it's not stuff that's quite this edgy or out of the box, right? Um, Now, in terms of subculture, the brothers that we do spend time with in the lodge, many of them have grown to know us over the years, right? And we're good friends and all that. Yet they probably know very little about our personal interests with regard to music and fashion and things of that nature. So this issue, I do believe, will give them a bit of insight as to who we are. It'll I think it'll serve as a bridge to get to know us a little bit better, if that makes sense.
Agreed. I feel this issue really taps into a demographic that is probably wanting to knock on the door, but is apprehensive.
If I might just add, I think this is probably the most unique Masonic magazine issue that's ever been produced. But in regards to what individuals might get out of it, I think if you have never come across Freemasonry but you are interested in music, subculture, tattoos, etc., then certainly it's an excellent segue into understanding Freemasonry and how it actually does connect to a lot of culture today. And I think in regards to Freemasonry, it shows just how influential Freemasonry is as a kind of philosophy and set of symbols, that it even permeates this world that we would tend to think has absolutely nothing to do with the craft. But beyond that, I would say that again, when you look at the article on heavy metal or the article on punk, it goes deep into the philosophy, and I think that you can really even begin to understand initiation or these movements of subculture or Freemasonry really a lot deeper. And certainly when I read the heavy metal article, I felt I understood heavy metal a lot better, but there was also a lot to contemplate on the subject of initiation itself as well. So,
well, I feel you guys are on the job. You probably covered a lot, and there's a lot to digest in there. Just like this past weekend, we had Masonic Con happen at South Pasadena Masonic Lodge. It's their second one, and Johnny, you had a very large role with this. How did you feel about the whole weekend?
I thought it was great. The fact that I was able to hang with Angel the whole time, that was great. Given our distance, because I'm in LA area, he's in New York area, so it's nice when we can get together and actually spend some quality time and catch up. And then as far as with the other brothers, I love that we meet on the level. That's one thing about Masonry. It's really cool. And then with regard to back to punk and subculture, the fact that punks come from a variety of different cultures and economic classes, Freemasonry is no different. We all come from a variety of classes, and be that cultural or economic. So that's really nice, and you can see that over the weekend. Spending time with brothers from all over the country, various who work at various professions.
Was the experience this weekend? This weekend's experience was very unique. I feel if anybody has if you've never been to a Masonic Con, you definitely need to check one out, especially South Pasadena Masonic Lodge. I know when I was sitting down next to you and you were talking about the new issue, and you had a copy of it. That was pretty dope, man. I really look forward to reading this issue. I feel it's going to touch many different parts that we've never seen before in Masonry, and I really look forward to that. Was there anything that you might have said, damn, I wish I could have added this to it?
I certainly think we covered the basis. Yeah, I mean, beatniks, punk, heavy metal, records, tattoos. I mean, it certainly gives a pretty good foundation, that's for sure.
Yeah, even some esotericism in there, the occult. Yeah,
Esotericism. Did you guys get into Tool at any point?
Yeah, we talk
Because
about Tool, yeah.
wow, okay, so
Tool,
yeah,
Ghost, Iron Maiden, yeah.
woo, so this is heavy
Yeah,
into metal and
that's
punk,
right,
man.
that's right, yeah.
Dead Kennedys, Killing Joke.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Okay, so it's action packed.
that's right.
I like that. So, are there any new projects you guys are working on? Anything else coming down the pipeline?
No, just for future fraternal reviews. I'm sure if this goes well, we could revisit subculture again in the future, though.
What are you looking forward to in the future, professionally or personally? And that's to both of you, whoever wants to start that one.
Okay, I'll just say something, and then Johnny, if you want to
Okay.
after. Yeah, well, professionally, I mean, I'm looking forward to Fraternal Review 2023. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of really excellent, groundbreaking issues. Personally, I'm working on another book and always working on more writing. So that's pretty much it for me.
And as for
Johnny?
me, just continuing to tattoo and contributing to my education as well, so, and that would be art education, just elevating the craft because it helps me with my day-to-day work, and then it's also a good way to avoid plateauing, by getting involved in other forms of art outside of tattooing completely, you know, more painting and things of that nature. And then also with regard to meditation, I've taught for years, and because of recent shutdowns due to COVID, some of the studios where I was teaching have closed down. And I was also teaching at the last tattoo studio where I was working at. I would hold meditation sessions in the lobby, which was really large. So that's in the cards as well. It's just a matter of finding a place where I can host the sits and then continuing my practice with that too, because it's something that I'm very involved with.
Where can people find the Fraternal Review magazine? How does one obtain this, especially this issue?
Yeah, they can go to the website of the Southern California Research Lodge. I don't have the URL with me, but if you look up,
I'll put it up.
yeah, they can go there, and you can get a PDF version when it's out. I would encourage people to subscribe and get the printed copy, certainly for the future, but that's the easiest way.
Yeah, and for those that are not familiar with the Fraternal Review, we do have issues that I have a couple here that, in case they're wondering, well, what kind of stuff do you guys cover? Well, obviously we're covering subculture with this issue, but in the past we've covered alchemy and Freemasonry. Earlier this year, Angel did fringe masonry, Freemasonry, and the Tree of Life with the tarot. Kabbalah and Freemasonry. So there's a lot to choose from for anyone who may be interested in those topics.
Where can people go to find out more about you and your work? And this is for both of you.
Okay, well, for me, it's pretty easy. They can just go to my website, angelmillar.com, ANGELMILLAR.com.
Yeah, and for me, I also have a website. It's riteofpassage.net, or they can find me on Instagram at riteofpassage.
Right on. So one question I do have for both of you, and this is a pretty deep question. Have either of you have had that I've made it moment yet?
I've made it in regard to...
Just in general, I've made it.
Yeah, I think we had that feeling when we put this issue together and saw it.
So, last question. If you could ask me anything, what would it be?
Well, what do you think of an issue on subculture and Freemasonry?
I really think it's needed.
Yeah.
It's a refreshing topic. I
Yeah.
feel, again, that's a whole demographic that's at the door,
Mm-hmm.
but is afraid to knock because they feel, again, the stigma of Freemasons just being guys in suits
Mm-hmm.
and very stuffy.
Yeah.
That's not the case.
No,
You
no,
know,
not
so
at all.
I really think this is very, very important work that you guys are doing.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy that you're doing it.
Great.
Somebody has to do it, right?
Yeah, and obviously we're not saying that everybody should be into heavy metal or punk, but what we are saying is, we shouldn't be hiding that we live in the 21st century. I know many brothers that are into heavy metal or punk or hip hop or whatever it is, and we really want to have a creative fraternity that's relevant to our own time, as well as able to express archetypal truths.
Johnny, did you have a question for me?
I do. What are your thoughts on the esoterically inclined candidates that are approaching these lodges? What are your thoughts on how to receive them at the door? Do you speak with them? Do you think it's good to remain kind of quiet, or would you prefer to be transparent and almost bring up the issue before they even do? Once they start asking questions and poking around, and you get a feel for them. Does that make sense?
Well, no, it does. I think there's a bunch of questions within that question, but I feel when somebody is looking for an esoteric lodge or a lodge that is heavy into the studies, one, vetting, making sure that that person isn't crazy, because I've dealt with that myself, and there's a line that you need to not cross. But I do feel that we have to nurture that demographic. I feel that demographic is huge, and there are some really good people who want to join and want to learn, and we have to provide some dialogue. We have to be able to answer their questions in a way that is it's going to educate them, but it's also going to give them reality. Now, the reality is most lodges are not into esoteric teachings or teaching the esoterics. And I get a lot of people asking me, well, what lodges do you go to for this? Well, Grand Lodge doesn't provide that. They don't say, okay, well, these lodges are this and this and this. This is just usually word of mouth, or people that you know, or brothers that you know, or groups that you know, right? So I feel in the future that's going to expand, and it's going to be a little easier for somebody to go on the internet and find South Pasadena Lodge or Culver City Fauché or Panamericana. And that is going to open the doors. But again, we do have to guard the West Gate well. We do have to vet the people coming in, because some people are just emotionally unstable when it comes to the occult or the esoterics, and they're not really ready to do the type of work that we're into, or be a part of a big group of men who are expected to act like men.
Mm-hmm.
So, in short, I think that's my answer to that.
That's great.
Any other questions for me before we close out? Do you have any shout outs or anybody you want to say what's up to? Johnny?
Well, I'd just like to express my gratitude to all the brothers out there that have been putting in the work. Brothers like Keepers of the Word, and of course, brothers like Angel Millar, and all the guys that contribute education to the fraternity in such a way that helps move the craft forward. It's a beautiful thing we're doing.
Yeah, likewise.
We have a long way to go,
yes,
but
we got a lot of work.
We're at a really good stage in the fraternity, I think, and I'm really curious to see as we advance in our as we advance in years, I'm really curious to see what's going to become of the craft, in the next 10, 20, 30 years. I think we're in for some exciting times. And I would say that guys like us are going to lead the way for the next few decades. It's the guys that are actually rolling up their sleeves. They're in the quarry doing the work, because at the end of the day, Freemasonry is industrious. Look no further than the beehive, right? We're all bees in the hive. And granted, some bees are able to do more work than others, but nonetheless, if each bee can at least carry their own weight, I think it can propel the fraternity forward and get us in a position to where we can excel.
Agreed. Great answer. So if you don't have any more, I'm going to close this out. So that brings us to the end of this episode. Thanks to Johnny Arias and Angel Millar for joining me during our great discussion on subculture in Freemasonry. I hope this episode was beneficial to you. As always, thanks for listening to Keepers of the Word with Mike. If you enjoy the show, leave a comment below and subscribe to our channel. Remember to tick the bell for notifications and be sure to come back for more topics and guests. Until then, this is Mike, and don't forget to always keep your word.